Welcome back. There are two big global news stories out there with some eerie similarities in the estimates of the number of civilians killed, paramilitaries working alongside government forces, and victims targeted for being in the wrong ethnic group. We're talking about Iraq and Darfur. But here's the question. Why has the Darfur story mobilized Western news media while in the Arab world, where the conflict is actually taking place, there's much less coverage? The Listening Post's Salah Qadar now on Darfur and the disturbing sounds of silence in the Arab news media.
200,000 dead, millions of refugees in need of help. A picture of hell on earth according to the UN. Sudan is 40% Arab, and Arabs are at the heart of this conflict. But for many in the Arab world, the humanitarian catastrophe that is Darfur just doesn't exist. The reason? The Arab media have largely ignored it.
Everybody in Darfur is a Muslim, whether you're a victim or perpetrator. Everybody is a Muslim. So why are Muslims killing Muslims?
The problem with Darfur when it comes to the Arab media is it doesn't fit the script. The script, of course, is Arabs victims. Other people are the aggressors, Israelis, Americans, even Iranians. But that's not the case in Darfur. In Darfur, Arabs are good guys and bad guys.
I think we are in a state of denial. The Arabs or Muslims cannot do this, it did not happen. But they can do this, and it did happen. And they have to reconcile themselves to the fact.
Arab media doesn't cover a lot of what's going on in Darfur crisis, but this doesn't mean that the Arab public opinion is not interested. A Zogby poll shows that there's a real eagerness among the Arab public opinion to learn more and to know more about what's happening in Darfur, while this is not reflected in the Arab media.
One could argue that geography plays a role, since this is Africa, not strictly the Middle East. But whilst this remains a non-event on the Arab media scene, European and North American media travel from greater distances to cover this story.
Beijing has blocked efforts to send UN peacekeepers there without Sudanese consent.
It's difficult to accept the implied rationale, the rationale implied by American media, which is that this is Arabs killing Africans, and Arabs kill because they don't know anything other than violence. That's what the audience is left to conclude. So that's, of course, not acceptable if you're part of the Arab media. You can immediately sense that you're being caricatured and demonized at the same time.
But could suspicion over the motivation and vigor of US media coverage account for this questionable media strategy?
How could this just be done by Arab militias without the support of the Sudanese government?
Most striking to me is that the media coverage has a single focus, and that's a focus on atrocities. There's no attempt to place them in context. There's no attempt to explain, to locate it historically, to show that there's any change happening.
You have Save Darfur, other groups that are very aggressive in generating and riling up the public, in generating public support to do something, and in the interim, in generating the media attention to get the public to say, do something. The Congo, many of these other conflicts, don't have the lobbyists in Washington. It's that simple. It comes down to money.
So why is the money there to pay lobbyists when it comes to Darfur?
I think it is about linking Darfur with the larger war on terror by portraying, framing the perpetrators of violence in Darfur as Arabs, the violence as Arab violence, the genocide as an Arab genocide. That's what it's about.
But with 22 Arab states, each with their own distinctive media output, it's not so much a question of an agenda, but which agenda?
Every Arab government has a different agenda from the other. Egypt is more interested in Darfur because Sudan is next door and it doesn't want a spillover. Whereas, let's say, a country like the Emirates or Oman, they are not directly involved and they can't influence events. So you find that the coverage there is far more limited.
The government of Sudan is doing this media blackout and is blocking access to Darfur and to information about Darfur, either by not issuing visas or by sending guides with journalists on the ground or taking journalists to government-controlled areas and showing them that life in the refugee camp is very good, etc., because they know that if information comes out, there will be more pressure on the Sudanese government.
It's not easy to cover Darfur. It's not easy for Western journalists, and it's not easy for Arab journalists. I talked to an Al Jazeera correspondent who was based in Khartoum a while back, and he said to go and cover Darfur, he had to go from Khartoum to Nairobi to West Africa, up to Cameroon, across from Cameroon to Chad, and then in through the back door into the refugee camps. If you don't do that, you're on a guided tour, you might as well go to Disneyland.
The result of these restrictions? A move toward analysis and away from reporting.
What happened is in Arab media, as you have so much coverage of the political issues related to Darfur, like what is the UK, France, the US, the UN reaction to what's happening in Darfur? And what we really need actually is not the political coverage, is the coverage from the ground. What are the facts? What are the stories? What are the images of the refugees, the images of the people being killed? And these are the images we don't have, and these are the images we need. It's not about the political process.
With so many civil wars to cover and so much human suffering to report, be it in Iraq, Congo, Somalia, or Sudan, to name but a few, should the media be responsible for shaping the attitudes of their population rather than reflecting them? Or should they, as it would appear, respond to the agendas of government and highly organised pressure groups?
More Global Village voices now on the Darfur story.
I think people have this perception of Darfur as, almost the land that time forgot. But the reality is that they have satellite dishes, they have radios, they have access to Al Jazeera, NBC, the BBC, and they understand that promises are being made that aren't being kept. If you haven't gone in treading very carefully and asking permission and meeting with community elders, it does get very violent. There have been lots of incidents where translators have been attacked, camera crews, I've had knives pulled on me, and I do think it's understandable that eventually the frustration starts to outweigh the intrusion of having journalists come into your homes.
The Western media's approach to Darfur over the last couple of years has really been start and stop. We've had either a flurry of reports all coming at the same sort of time, or we've had weeks and months of nothing, when of course the problem is going on constantly.
Here at the Listening Post, there's nothing we enjoy more than a big news event covered by state-run television. So the opening of the Chinese Communist Party Congress this week was always going to be on our radar.
The Great Hall of the People once again becomes the spotlight around the world. The members of the Standing Committee of the Presidium of the 17th CPC National Congress sitting on the front line include Hu Jintao, Jiang Zemin, Wu Bangguo, Wen Jiabao, Jia Qinglin, Zeng Qinghong, Wu Guanzheng, Li Changchun, Luo Gan, Wang Lequan, Wang Zhaoguo, Hui Liangyu, Liu Qi, Liu Yunshan, Wu Yi, Zhang Lichang, Zhang Dejiang, Zhou Yongkang, Yu Zhengsheng.
In a way, our last item this week ties into our lead story on Al Gore. We're not in the habit of running advertisements as our internet videos of the week, but this German ad, an award winner at the Cannes Film Festival, has clearly touched people. At last count, almost 900,000 hits on YouTube. The ad is ultimately about alternative energy, but the message has more to do with people, the harnessing of someone's potential, and a different way of looking at things. We'll see you next time at the Listening Post.
I think I was always misunderstood. People just didn't seem to like me. I think I annoyed them. I got on their nerves. I don't know why. That's just the way it was. Yeah, it was lonely. Really lonely. But you get used to it. And then, one day, everything changed. Since I've got this job, life is completely different. I finally feel useful, good at something.